He must have seen something in me because he kept me there. He asked me, he said, if you think you can train with adults, then I would like you to stay. And I said, what am I good at? I love teaching. I'm going to teach. And I spoke to a few older martial artists, and they said, it'll never work. You watch me. My name's Mark Stewart. I've been doing martial arts for some 52 years. I started my career at 8 years old as a boxer. A friend that I had been boxing with, he had this girlfriend, and there was a couple of the tough guys at the school that decided that she was his girlfriend. And so there's two or three of them bailed my friend up. He looked at her and he said, if she tells me that she wants to be with you, then I'll fight you. But if she says that she's with me, like I believe she is, then I won't fight because I have no need to. These three guys started hitting on him, like beating him. And he wouldn't let anyone interfere, and he never retaliated. Never retaliated. He took a beating. The principle behind that and the strength of character to withstand blows and not flinch. He was bruised, he was bleeding. And I thought, wow, there's something in this karate, the discipline, the strength behind that at that age. I want to know more about it. That's what really enticed me in to start with. The first instructor I had was a Māori guy he was originally from up here in Auckland, Ngāpui, and he was incredibly powerful. I got training and he took me in like his own son. And in fact, out of the dojo, he would call me son. In those early days, the karate that I was learning was quite a unique style, even though it was traditionally based. It was quite unique, and the training was unique in that we would hop on one leg. He would hop to work half an hour each leg, come home after work and go out the back and start hopping again. And in those days, he had this punch bag. And when it was time for karate, he'd say, come on son, we're going to karate. And he'd throw the bag on his shoulder and we'd run to karate. There's no driving or anything. So we'd run to karate. I'm like 12 years old at this stage. And an hour and a half, I'm still trying to see where he's gone in case I get lost, because he would just keep running and he wouldn't look back. It was a very old way of learning martial arts and mental strength, and he would talk about, you know, your fighting spirit and things like that. The fighting spirit is the most important thing to develop, and you can only develop it through harsh training. So we had the school in Masterton, which I ended up running. That's where it all began for me, and at 17 I finally got to go to Wellington and grade for my black belt. And in this style, there weren't many people that had graded to black belt. Anyway, so he put me through a grading, it was 7.5 hours long. And he said, is there anyone, because Mark is going to attempt to become my number one, is there anyone here that would like to challenge him? I thought, oh my God, I was 17 years old, I'm going, oh no. And I'm sure he set me up, because about 15 people stepped forward, all from his gym. I couldn't believe it, and I thought, no way. I'm going to kill you guys, you know, like for stepping forward. He pulled out concrete roofing tiles and said, if you can break these, we'll finish here. And funnily enough, at that stage, I didn't even think about it. I had no fear of it. I was like, not going to let these stop me. And I had six 1-inch concrete roofing tiles that I punched through. Went to bed about 9 o'clock, and I woke up at 3 in the afternoon the next day. I hadn't budged all night. And I sat up eventually, and my shins, even through the guards, they were just swollen black and blue, and my forearms black and blue from blocking and taking punishment. A couple of years ago, I had caught up with my old master. He lives up north, and he said to me, you did the hardest and longest grading I ever put anyone through. He said, I wanted to test you, and I wanted to see how far I could push you before you'd give up. And he said, after 4 hours, I knew you weren't going to. From there, I needed to do my OE. My instructor always pushed me. He said, he said, get out of Masterton, because the hills around you will become the world. And it was sound advice, it really was, because you get stuck in a small town. Go around, visit the world as much as you can, he said, because that's the real education. That's life skills. So he encouraged me, and eventually I took off, and I was best man for a friend of mine in Washington, D.C., so I went to America first. And I trained a couple of times with some very, very good Taekwondo instructors over there while I was there. And then I moved over to England, but I didn't really like it, so I hitchhiked up north, and I found my home in Scotland. There was something like familiar. It felt like home, because my ancestors are from Scotland. So the day I got dropped off in Edinburgh, first bar I walked into, I got a job. Like, with my backpack and everything. We just went in to have a drink, have a beer. And I said, yeah, any jobs, And they said, yeah, actually, it was a Canadian girl who was just leaving. And so I did a couple of weeks touring up north of Scotland, and then came back and settled into my first job. And continued my personal training. The Scottish thought I was mad. They called me the mad Kiwi, because we would have, they were drinkers, that's their culture, and I was working in that culture. So sometimes I would be out at nights with them till all hours. And they'd say, you running tomorrow, Kiwi? I said, yeah. And they wouldn't believe me, but I was out of habit. I'd get up at 6 in the morning, and in Scotland there was nobody up. And there's a place called Arthur's Seat, after King Arthur, and I worked out it was an hour and a half run, and if I did this loop, and gave me this massive run, but then this incredible view. I stayed in Scotland until eventually the government caught up with me and said, you're now an overstayer, you've got a week to get out. And I was like, oh, really? But I've got a good job and a girlfriend. And anyway, they said, no, you have to leave. So I got a ticket and flew across to Moscow, and then down to Bangkok. And then I thought, I have to stay in Thailand. I thought I had enough money maybe for 2 weeks. Anyway, on the plane I met an English guy who had been there before me, and he said, just stay with me, you'll be right. I ended up there 2 months. I was talking to a storeman at my bakery, and he said, oh, if I was ever going to join a karate, I'd join this style called Ashihara. I said, what? I'd never heard of it. He says, oh, I've got some books. I bought some books on it. He said, I'll bring them in. He brought them in, and at the back I went through it, and I was fascinated, because you could see it come from traditional Japanese. There was still the aspect of the traditional Japanese, but what he was teaching was so rational and realistic. It was fighting karate, and that's what the books were called, real fighting karate. And at the back there was an address for a school in Auckland, and that was in Mount Eden. I was living in Eastern Beach at the time. So I went along. I thought, this is fantastic, this is incredible, this is what I want to do. So I started training every night with him and learning as much as I could and getting graded, with the whole goal of getting to Japan and training in Japan. He got me up to my brown belt and then organised a trip to Japan, to the headquarters and a couple of other schools. They promoted me straight to a 2nd degree black belt in Ashihara. With that, I asked if I could come back to New Zealand and open my own school. One day I had a fallout at the job I was in. I was miserable with the job, and I went home to my partner at the time and said, I've walked out of the job. She said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to teach full time. How are you going to do that? And I said, I don't know, but... And I spoke to a few older martial arts instructors that had been around a long time. They said, it'll never work. You can never teach martial arts full time. You'll lose your passion. And I said, nah, you watch me. When people say I can't do it, that's like, you watch me. I think the big difference between my era and this era is in my era you could win a world championship, have your hand raised and you'd bow and congratulate and you'd quietly walk out. These days they're jumping around the ring and climbing on ropes and screaming at people, and they come before a fight and they're abusing each other and they're starting fighting, and to me that's the most disrespectful and un-martial art thing you can ever do or be. Everyone these days, there's so much glory, it's so easy to get a black belt, everyone can get a black belt. And these belts with all these stripes, and you can see that they don't train because the belts got nowhere. Their gi's got nowhere, you know, and they just walk around and grunt at people. Or I would have mums coming to me and saying, my son's been here for 3 years now. He should be grading for a black belt. You know, it's like, well, all right, if you want, I can give him a black belt, but he's not going to really be a black belt. I can give it to him. I can put him through, and he won't even be good enough to do it, but I can, easy, anyone can give you a black belt, if that's all that's important to you. Or is the fact that he doesn't train outside of my classes, the fact that he only trains once a week for 3 years. How do you expect him to improve if he comes once a week and doesn't do anything outside? Oh, but he's got soccer. He goes to chess club. He's, you know, it's like, well, all right, but let's put it in perspective. That it's good that he keeps coming to karate once a week, but you can't expect him to wear a black belt and feel like he's earned it. I wasn't feeling happy with myself. Nobody else, it was myself. And the way, the direction of the martial arts and things like that. I felt like it had lost its spirit and its real heart. And it came the same time as new owners decided after 10 years that we weren't suitable clients for that building. And it was very, very interesting with all those hundreds of students I had when I closed down and had to pull the place apart to see who was by my side to help me. And it was half a dozen people. They were saying, oh, as a black belt, I can't give you the commitment that you require. Your standards are so high, it's interfering with my work life and my family life, and you know, I'm going to resign. And then a week or 2 weeks later, was running an opposition school full-time down the road from me. And he was one of my best friends. That was way back in the early days. That was a kick in the guts that it took a long time for me to get over. I had a group of young black belts, and then out of nowhere, without talking to me or anything, they did the same thing. I found on the internet they had opened a school up the road, promoted themselves, which is unheard of, give themselves a promotion. Some were second dance under me, and they promoted themselves to third dance. One was only a first dan. They suddenly all became third dans and founders of this karate style in their early 20s. And for me, that was the last straw. I felt like, okay, my time in martial arts is finished. I'll keep training, but just for myself. I've been through lots of times in my life where I've just thought, I could give up. But I couldn't actually stop teaching. I was starting to regain my passion because it felt genuine again. And I didn't have to do it commercially. I was just loving teaching. I have a good following. I teach out of my home dojo. There's no pressure. And these people aren't worried about competition. They aren't worried about belts. They aren't worried about glory. They just come and love training. They love the camaraderie. And so it's come full circle. And so now I'm coming up for 60 years old and actually loving teaching again. I mean, sometimes I get tired and I say to Carol, my darling partner over there, I'll say, oh, why am I doing this? I'm so tired, I don't want to. And the minute I put my gear on and start, I'm like, this is why I'm still doing it. So I'll keep doing it for a long time yet, I think, so long as my body lets me. Real martial arts, it takes a huge commitment and a lot of sacrifice and a lot of times going through stuff that you feel like you've done 1,000 times and wondering, why am I still doing this? It's not if I feel like giving up, if I feel like quitting. It's when I get that feeling like I want to quit and give up, I'm bored. That's when you have to step up. That's when true martial arts comes in, because you endure, you persevere. You know it's just a plateau. You know once you get through that plateau, it'll climb again. And where I am right now in my life, I don't care about fame. I don't care about lots of students or anything like that. I just care about the ones that want to be with me and learn what I'm teaching now. If you get value from that, and we're all having a good time, that's it. You know, I'm 60, I've got nothing to prove. I did everything I wanted to do in martial arts. There's a saying about it, better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, right? And everyone knows that. And I've come full circle in that respect. I mean, I don't claim to be a great fighter or the biggest, baddest guy in the world. I've had my time where I was certainly up there with them. But now I'm mowing lawns at a golf course, you know, and enjoying it. And so I've become the gardener, you know, the warrior in the garden. So I'm happy with that. My life's very, very good.